Hey everyone, it's Ivan, KidBadger.com, out here to tell you about the Tennessee Turbo Nights with SureFire. So what are Tennessee Turbo Nights? Well, SureFire has a pretty awesome track record of putting on really cool, meaningful media events where they're trying to demonstrate and kind of showcase a product, but actually creating context for it. So sometimes if you go to like media range days and stuff, they're usually terrible. You're like shooting paper at 100 yards, the gun's not even zeroed anyway, and you're like, cool. Like, we just shoot these into the berm at 5 yards for all the good we're doing. So, creating context. Turbo Nights was a really cool event put on in Tennessee by SureFire and some sponsors to showcase their new turbo lights, basically high candela lights. So, whole thing took place at Royal Range, which is really cool. Basically a converted movie theater and taking all of those different individual theaters and turning them into indoor range. And on top of that, huge showroom and stuff where you can actually buy all kinds of stuff. Guns, ammo, accessories, all that. And also rent some pretty cool guns if you want to do that too. Really cool range though that offers a lot of different bays for different types of training. And being indoors, I'm not a fan of indoor ranges. It allows you to control light. So rather than just waiting for the sun to set at an outdoor range, control the light so you can basically move back and forth from shooting under light to turning the lights off and then shooting like with your own weapon mounted or handheld lights. Really great from a training aspect. And on top of that, they actually have an indoor shoot house. Pretty neat facility. And consistent with the way SureFire does things, bringing in good instructors. Whether in the past it's been Bill Blowers, Bill Rapier, this time none other than Kyle Lamb of Viking Tactics. After kind of a initial introduction as well as opportunity gear setup, which as a quick aside, pretty nice being able to show up somewhere and actually have quality gear across the board to use. So by way of example, mag pouches as well as belt setups by S-Tac, and in addition to that, Safariland holsters for our guns, then using Glocks with, of course, SureFire's new turbo light. Most of them had some sort of optic on there, Timney triggers in them, and pretty much everything across the board, to include iPro if you needed that, by Oakley. For my own part, I ended up kind of with my own stuff because in part I was traveling to competition and had some stuff I was using anyway and other stuff like iPro. I wear a prescription iPro, but I was using the Unity tactical clutch that I had all set up for pistol and carbine work. After going through those initial introductions, kind of an overview of the product and Kyle kind of speaking to the idea and the desire for a high candela light to include this turbo series.
And what I had been begging for was to take a Scout Light head and put it on the X300. Okay, the reason I like the Scout Light is because it had a focus beam, because it's on a carbine, it's going to give us that focus beam, we're going to have a little bit more reach there. Well, focus beam and reach is all relative. If I'm in a building that's partially lit, a completely dark building is very easy to see in. If you have a flashlight, it's super easy to see in. But a building that has light, like you're in a school and you got light coming in of the windows and you got a guy at the end of the hallway, it's very, very difficult to target discriminate. So
very quickly we moved over to the range, got some mags jammed up, and Kyle went after it, basically creating a period of instruction for all of us that were there at the event. And what it was kind of composed of is, I think, kind of media. Whether it was writers from like the Firearms blog or Recoil or other people doing video content, and yeah, got after it. Initially going over kind of loading procedures and moving on from there. Moving, crawl, walk, run. Started out initially just drawing out from the holster, taking shots, in part kind of knocked the rust off, and then also probably for Kyle to make sure that everyone there was probably going to be safe. And to that end, actually really awesome, solid group of shooters there. So immediately continued to progress, working through actually light activation, whether it was handheld lights or weapon mounted lights, and then just continuing to add complexity, moving into shooting behind barricades. both VTAC barricades as well as just some pretty simple like pillars left and right side, and working through those different positions, knowing kind of when and where to activate that light, and taking advantage of those turbo high candela lights. Again, time and place for kind of everything. And those high candela lights, one of the benefits is being able to push a tighter beam of light. So if you're behind a barricade, you can get relatively close to the barricade, activate your light, and you have this beam pushing past rather than like a big flood where you end up backlighting yourself and basically washing stuff out because so much of that light is getting pushed back at you. And then continuing that complexity and hopefully not going to shoot a rental car. Brought a couple cars into the range and everyone started getting reps basically working out of those vehicles. Oriented different ways, facing different directions, and getting the gun out, engaging initially from the driver's seat, clearing seat belts, all that stuff. Getting to work and progress through all of that with those pistols. And as people had more familiarity and competence, moved into doing it all under darkness. As we moved into the afternoon, kind of shifting gears some, actually started going over CQB. Initially, team-based, think like 4-man CQB, and again, just concepts and principles. This was not full-blown CQB class, but went over that stuff with Kyle and then moved over to the indoor shoot house and got to do some reps, which was really cool.
Go, 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 go. Clear?
And rounding out day one, spent some time out in the parking lot out back with a number of different vehicles set up and a number of different targets. And getting to see and compare basically those SureFire lights, whether it was the dual fuel Scouts or the new dual fuel Turbo Scouts. And definitely appreciating kind of that difference between the two. Again, depending on application of being able to push out further with a tighter beam, which can definitely come into play depending on what you're doing when it comes to target ID and things like that. Well, day one was dedicated to pistol and that SureFire X300 Turbo. Changed gears on day two. Initially getting our carbine set up, BCM carbines with SureFire RC2 cans, and then either a red dot or low power variable. For my own part, chose red dot, mounted with Duick Defense backup iron sights, and then of course, Kyle's new sling from Viking Tactics. Pretty cool. I had never actually put hands on it before, but got to do some work with that later too. So after we got our gun set up, ended up going over to the range and again, kind of crawl, walk, run. Initially starting up close, start working offset, doing some up drills, and then getting into a little bit of transitions. And very quickly building on that, killing the lights, getting on to light activation to include with those transitions as well. And moving towards that run, moving back, using barricades. Kyle initially going through, talking about barricades and their use and showing the different shooting positions that you can get from behind them. After people have the opportunity to work through those barricades with the lights on, it's time to turn the lights off and get into activating that white light, and figuring out kind of how you need to manipulate your gun to get those good hits at distance.
But you have done nothing about it because you lack the self-confidence to give you a start. In other words, you are now where Henry Ford was before he built the first model of his world-famous automobile.
And then it's time to move back over those vehicles and see if we could possibly damage that rental car.
Put his idea into operation by making use of the mastermind principle I mentioned in our second division. Alliance with his wife. Now, the only question I wish to ask you is, why don't you form a mastermind alliance with someone? Begin putting your ideas to work for you.
Nice. Very nice, Simon.
It was pretty cool, just kind of that progression from the beginning of the day to there, using all those things we'd worked on, whether it was understanding offset, because some of the targets were closer than others, or light activation, and those unconventional positions, which basically pull from shooting around those barricades. So that when we got into vehicles, initially shooting from the driver's seat, and then getting out and getting good hits on different targets around those vehicles. One of the things Kyle went over as well is sling deployment, and his new sling, it's actually pretty cool. It can basically stow in itself, so going over how to stow that, so when you're drawing that carbine out of the vehicle, you're not snagging on everything. We were definitely doing a lot of shooting. Occasionally, you need to just take a break and cool that can off. Really awesome opportunity to train with Kyle and just get little bits of wisdom here and there, and the opportunity to prove stuff out. At one point, there was conversation around whether, hey, do we clear the seatbelt first, or do we start shooting first from inside the seatbelt? And getting into the discussion around, hey, we're doing something in isolation on a range versus how's this really play out? And I mean, if someone's 5 feet in front of your car, you're probably going to shoot through the windshield in your seatbelt. But for the sake of training, what are we going to do? And kind of repping stuff out on the clock, figuring out, hey, what's actually faster? How does this play out? And yeah, lots of good information there. Then that afternoon, back into the shoot house. And while initially day one kind of centered around 4-man CQB, today 1-man CQB, the place you do not want to be. And it was interesting because you're like, oh yeah, cool. I got 3 buddies with me, and now it's you have yourself. All those concepts and principles are the same, but you have way more responsibility. Honestly, not a good place to be 1-man CQB, but it can be done, and hey, how do you go about it? So we immediately got to start getting reps, again, building off what we had learned the previous day, but this time kind of being responsible for everything. And seeing how all those concepts and principles basically played across, whether it was 4-man or 1-man. So people going through, getting good reps. Show me your hands.
Okay, she showed you her hands. She's laying on the ground now. Index, very good, good.
And if you want to actually learn something and kind of test it out, you need consequences. So turn it into force on force, where there are consequences. Show me your hands. What's up, my man? Show me your hands. Down on the ground.
Hey, my fingers. Yeah, he's out, he's out.
That Tennessee Turbo Nights event was awesome on a number of fronts. One, honestly, the opportunity to go train with Kyle Land. Awesome guy, wealth of knowledge, and yeah, some really cool, really fun training. But SureFire set it up in such a way that, yeah, like it was of value. Like you were not looking at a light in isolation. So rather than going out to a flat range and being like, hey, here's our X300 Ultra, here's our X300 Turbo, like there's the difference. You actually had a meaningful way to go through and use those new lights and see where there was benefit. As far as, hey, target ID at distance or shooting from behind a barricade, whether it's a vehicle or like cutout, whatever it was, and having your light be able to push past it further and not backlight you and things like that. And again, there's no, whether it's lights, guns, tactical gear, anything, there's no like, this is the way, because everything is nuanced. It really comes down to application. And to be able to give us opportunities though to actually use those things and see where they actually have a lot of benefit. To include whether it's X300 Turbo, a pistol, or the new Turbo Scout Light on a rifle, and yeah, get some really good training and shooting behind those. Eventually, I'll finish out my review on those lights, but overall, definitely grateful for the opportunity to go out there and put in time with all that stuff and train with Kyle, who he's just a solid guy. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Stay down. I'm down. It's not personal.
Okay, index.